rally still running, affecting the audio.
It's all okay now.
Alright, one last time, and then I quit streaming forever. What is up, ladies and gentlemen of the internet? My name is Jade, and I'm glad to be back online, I suppose. I'm joined today by my good friend Simon Anderson, Hannah, and some guy I've never met before, Neil. We'll get into that really shortly, but Simon, how are you going?
Good afternoon, Jade and Hannah, and of course Neil as well. Thank you for joining us, and to everybody watching, it's good to be back. Taking a nice little summer holiday reprieve from the stream. Let our energy levels reset, and to take on 2022. And boy, gosh, hasn't a lot happened since we've been in this position. It is a completely different world, and all I can say is honk honk.
Hannah, it has been a few weeks since we've been on the stream. Obviously, I don't even know how to run it anymore. How have you been?
Well,
We'll get you on.
for the first time in years, I actually took a holiday, and I was missing you. I was missing the stream. I was missing streaming and missing you guys. But no, I'm doing well. I've been busy and look forward to sharing a few points that I've got today. So yeah.
I didn't get to ask Simon this, but I'm really interested to hear from you, Hannah. How oppressed do you feel today? Because that's really important.
What does oppressed mean?
Yeah, I don't even know what that
No.
means. Yeah, do you have any comments around that, or not really?
No, I don't feel oppressed.
Okay, good. And now we're
Ridiculous.
going to come now to Neil Johns. Neil, thanks so much for being part of the show. Good friend of Simon's, I believe, and you work somewhere where I used to work. So welcome to the stream.
Hey, thanks for having me, everybody. It's an honour and a privilege. I'll say that for now. Let's see how we go, whether I'm honoured and privileged in an hour's time.
How
do I
oppressed do
feel
you feel
oppressed?
today? Yeah, how oppressed do you feel today, Neil?
So it's definitely oppressed and not impressed.
Yep.
On a scale of 1 to 10, I don't feel hugely oppressed right now. I think there's some oppression coming, and I think there's a lot of other people feeling highly oppressed.
Yeah, thanks for that.
That's my take.
And as always, we're really stoked to be live streaming on Twitch and DLive today. So if you have any input or comments you'd like to make about the show this afternoon, feel free to leave those in the chat. We do see them live and we can react to them. But for now, without further ado, we do have the question of the day. Simon, I hope you've been looking forward to this one. It's been a few weeks.
I'm ready.
Awesome, mate. So, the question of the day, or of the week for today, is: who cares for children more, the government or their parents? Who cares for children more, the government or their parents? Who wants to have a go first?
I've got some ideas on this. I'm happy to let people have a little think about it.
Okay, we'll flip to Simon for this one. What do you reckon, Simon?
I think for the most part, parents definitely care a lot more about their kids. There's probably a select few that unfortunately aren't fit for parenting, and the government does care about them more than their parents. But the only reason they do care about them is the fact that it's all about, I guess, like balancing the expense sheet. For them, they want to make sure that those kids aren't a liability on the community, so they'll and make sure that they can instill the philosophy or the thought patterns in those kids that they want. Like governments definitely care a lot about the children of their country, and they pay a lot of money to make sure that they can make them think like they want them to as much as possible. So that's, I guess, where I'd put it. And I'm going to see if I can try and make my camera quality better, because I'm a bit blurry. But anyway, yeah, over to somebody else.
Neil, how are you feeling? You want to take this one?
Yeah, I'll give it a whack. I see it as a kind of like a wheel or concentric circle, in that the parents have to care about who the government is, so in order for the government to then care enough about the parents, so that parents can give their children the quality of life that they want to. And it kind of goes round and round, which creates, depending on the government at the time, some kind of Stockholm syndrome in a way, which is useful for a political party, for people to feel beholden to them. The question is, what do the kids care about? And that's kind of what's happening now, right? There's a whole generation of people that care about things that are not politicized. You know, there's the whole my son, he doesn't give a rat's ass about owning a house or even buying a car. He just wants to do his thing. He's transient. He lives with technology. The rules are breaking. The rules don't apply, and that's going to be tricky for a political party to even have the illusion of care. That was a long ramble, but I hope I got a point across.
That's really
Definitely.
That's really interesting. So Hannah,
I definitely, actually, you summed it up nicely for me, Neil. So thank you.
Thank you.
I do think it's a wheel too, but I do think where things go wrong is that we shouldn't be leaving the government to be raising children, even if children are in government assistance, and especially I think of education. Right now, parents are told what their children are to learn and being taught, but there's some things that I completely disagree that should not be left down to a teacher to teach a child about a certain topic. It should be left to a parent to do, and not then just be told, oh well, they're going to be learning it at school, so no, don't worry about it. So I think it is definitely about the parents, but I do think the government has their own ways and views, and I think it does need to be more, the government need to consultate more with citizens in the community, what is actually wanted and how can we progress and grow the society for Aotearoa.
I guess let's reframe the question. Is it possible for an organisation to care about people?
you want my opinion?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. I mean, look at the framing of health and safety in this current environment. Absolutely ridiculous. You know, like, we work in the social services sector, right, gentlemen? Like, we work in one of the mandated sectors. Why are we mandated? Nobody knows. Everybody just accepts it. There are enough reasons to think that the vaccine could be risky for some people, but to be able to work here, regardless of how talented you are or how much you have to contribute, if you haven't got that needle on your arm, you're not valid here. So I don't think it's possible for organizations to care. That's just one example, but I could rattle off thousands more where, you know, generally speaking, organizations, including ones that I've been a part of, are really just out for the bottom line.
So my theory around, you know, the big, large corporates, and you know that the company, they have values and they have objectives and visions and that kind of thing, that vehicle has one purpose, and that is to make profit for their shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Everything else that falls out of that is to enable them to make profit for their shareholders. So do they care? depends on your definition of what caring is. Do they care in an emotional connection way? I would say that's highly unlikely, unless they were sociopaths.
Or do they care for the means to, to care, or the ends to care? Are they caring for caring's sake, or are they caring because of the outcome of what happens if they do care that? In that
Yeah.
definition of it, that's the thing. So, for most organizations, it's conditional. It's not a true sense of doing what they think is best for an individual. It's doing what they think is best for the individual, so that their bank account grows, or they meet their objective.
Most definitely.
I just wanted to go back onto what you said about the health and safety
Framing.
and the sector that we're in.
Yep.
I've said it many times on the live stream before. The biggest argument for the proponent of mandates is the science of the argument and the legitimacy of the mandate based on the scientific outcome that it's going to generate. And then it's clearly proven not to. And so when the argument comes against them that this is what the science is saying, they don't follow the same logic that they were trying to get you to adopt. It's frustrating.
Okay, so here's an example. I was thinking about this today. Say there's an Omicron outbreak in Wellington, right? How would that be reported? Do you know what I mean? Like that, you can take many different angles on that, but we'll see.
Run that by me again, because I'm black and slow. I know we briefed you on this before the show, so.
Yeah, I briefed you on the white middle-aged male as well. I just think, if there's, like Simon says about the science can be used for one delivery, but then when there's a confrontation around that delivery, then it can be used another way around, right, depending on your agenda. So I was thinking today, if there were to be an outbreak in Wellington, how would that be presented? How would that be conveyed to the public? And what would be the kind of the take that the government would have on it?
Oh, we already have an example of that, Simon. So, the Prime Minister had a COVID scare, and she's all they said was she's isolating and having some Panadol. Like there's literally nothing else you can do for COVID/Omicron, whatever variant we're on. And I think we overblow the response to it. Like if the only treatment remedies available are Panadol and staying home for a bit, sounds like the flu to me. I know people go up in flames whenever anybody says that, but that's where I'm at.
So the argument for that would be, well, yeah, because it's mild because I'm vaccinated, right? But then you don't hear about anyone. You don't hear about nothing's reported about someone else. It's like, but it, someone goes, I'm vaccinated and I was okay, and they're like, yeah, but it could have been worse.
Yeah.
I can actually speak to that. I can actually speak to that. So not me personally, and I'm not going to dox them, but I had a friend, still have a friend. She has 2 young children. I think they were 6 and like 18 months old, like young kids. So she was vaccinated, so you can't really qualify that based on what you just said there, Neil. But her 2 young kids got full-on COVID-19, totally fine. Obviously not vaccinated because of how young they were, and they didn't have the pediatric availability back then. They were totally like fine, nothing, just like Panadol, resting for a bit, and that was it.
Yeah, on the other hand, my wife's got a friend in the UK, and their whole family, I think it was back in Delta, and they were on their ass, right? And she was like, couldn't get out of bed. She's like, hang on a minute, I did 2 vaccinations, I've done a boost, I've done everything I've been told to do, and then she's had to give up work because she can do one thing a day and she needs a nap. Like, she's totally rolled over. But her frustration and anger is there's been this message, this constant message, and I've bought into it, and I'm no better off. But then that's my point. The government would go, yeah, but you probably would died. You know, so it's like, well, how do you, and if you want to talk of science, I cannot find anything to justify a booster moving to 3 months anywhere. I can see
Um,
an FDA paper for 5 months, but that's it.
no. And to add to your point too, I've recently spoken to a friend who's actually become more disabled because she had
Their partner.
the vaccine.
Yeah.
And she, before she had chronic pain issues, but now she's basically going to need a walker, and she's not going to be able to walk because of the side effects from actually taking the vaccine. She hasn't been sick at all. She's
Almost bedridden.
she was bedridden
Yeah.
for 6 weeks, and she's now going to be possibly bedridden for life. So that's
Shit.
that's the thing that's kind of questioning people. And the thing that I was gonna bring today too is, which I find really fascinating, is it's been announced that the Pfizer vaccine causes myocarditis and pericarditis, and actually has heart medication in it. It's like
The pediatric one does. I just need to correct you on that.
oh
Yeah.
the peri.
Yeah.
So I had another
That poses the question: why was it put in for the pediatric one?
Yeah, why was it put in for the pediatric thing? And why I was getting a bit confused is because we actually have a friend who has a heart condition, and he said, "Oh no, it's all good. I took it because it had that added bonus, added protection
Heart
of
medicine
heart
inside.
medicine in it." So
That's some really weird logic.
yes.
Let me get that juicy heart medicine.
Hey, here's a question: how much do you reckon Trevor Mallard cares about the children?
Oh no, he
I don't
would
know.
care a lot because he eats them. Yeah.
He cares a lot about the ones in the grounds in front of the beehive. He cares about them heaps. He wants to make sure they got a shower. So he turned the sprinklers on to make sure that they would stay nice and clean.
I got a friend who's a cop, and he's like, fuck him. He's like, he can't use the police as his personal security. Like, the police should pull out, leave him to it. If he wants to start a fight, then fine. But let's not protect him from what he's starting. See what occurs. It's pretty easy to be big and brave, right? If you got a whole army behind you.
You got the power of the government.
Yeah.
Simon,
Have
what's
you
your...
Wikipedia'd?
Sorry. I was going to ask, what's your take, Simon, on the Parliament protest that we have at the moment down at the Beehive?
It's interesting, right? It's a global movement, and I mean, Neil, you wondered why I said honk honk at the start of the live stream. Was because it's about the truckers, baby. 2022, the year of the truckers. The convoys are happening all around the world.
I was
started
just
in
thinking you were
Canada.
too young to know Hong Kong Phooey.
Oh no, yeah. There's the start in Canada, happening in Australia now. They're around the Parliament in Canberra. It's happened here. So yeah, we're honking all the way through 2022 until the mandates end. I think I don't know how long they'll stay. Maybe if the weather doesn't turn around, a lot of the people that aren't too convinced will head off, and I'm sure the numbers will drop over after the weekend's over. So it'll be only the diehards for the next few days, and I'm sure the government's planning to make it really hard to be there, Monday through Wednesday, so that by the time the next weekend comes around, they don't get another wave of support. They're going to probably try and end this between Monday and Wednesday.
The Prime Minister said that it's certainly not the biggest protest she's seen, so that reads to me like she wants it to be bigger. What do you reckon, Neil?
Well, okay, so there's a few ways this can go, but I think from the way I see it, that there's the core group of people, and they're not going to fall away. So it's not going to get smaller. So it can either stay the same or it can grow. And what we've seen is people are coming out in support that you wouldn't necessarily suspect. I did a little poll on my personal Facebook page, and it's kind of around like 96% are double vaccinated, So, but then I'd be curious as to how many anti-mandate, and it would be a solid 90% of my friends are anti-mandate, regardless of their jobs, regardless of whether they're vaxxed or non-vaxxed. I think regarding the protests as well, there's an interesting thing going on there. So the downside to the protest is there's not a clear objective and a clear hierarchy within, how the group is made up and who the leader is and who, because we all know like any conflict should be negotiated, right? Everyone should sit at the table. It always comes to that. You look at any different points of views around the world around any kind of subject. So that's the downside to it. But the upside, because there is no clear agenda, no clear hierarchy of who to engage, I think the government is sitting there going, or the police, depending on if you believe that the police should be operational, whether the government should be operational, but they're kind of like, what do we do? Like, we haven't got someone that we can kind of get on the phone and go, let's sit in a quiet room quietly, and we won't tell anyone, and we'll see how we get on, and then come to some kind of consensus.
I agree.
So yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know if it's a pro or a con for the protest to be the way it is. I really don't know.
I think it is. I'm leaning on the side of that. The loose definition of the group collective is a very big positive, and I only say that because there is a subconscious connection to all of them there, that they're fighting against the unjust rules that the government have put in place, and that everybody who's there has at least that in their intention and when they're turning up. So I don't think that's going to get muddied, and as long as they can figure out an objective that satisfies the group and everybody else that's supporting the group, then we can get a resolution. But if the government, I don't know what's going to happen if they decide to kind of decide not to play ball with them, because they could just ignore them until they become violent and then throw them all away.
Yeah, I think, and it's kind of normally with a cause, there's some commonality amongst the people fighting for the cause, whether it's demograph or gender or, or occupation or whatever. And it's kind of interesting to see, people who are in their teens and people that are professionals and people that were professionals, people that are not by any means and cannot be labeled kind of hippie. I'm just up for a bit of I'll back anything because I've got nothing else to do. It's, that, like Simon says, the people there are highly considered, but it's not a doesn't appear to me to be a cohesive strategy. But like I said, that could be the biggest strength.
I want to come to Hannah. Hannah, you've made comments to me outside of the stream around the percentage of the vote that the government has. It obviously makes problems for the expediency in which they can make laws. Did you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, so one thing that I've recognised is the current government that we've got at the moment has the majority vote, so they're able to then change laws a lot faster because they don't need consensus of the government, they don't need consensus of any other government, so that means they don't need any consensus of the citizens.
They're not doing any kind of consultation, Simon. I've never seen this.
So any kind of consultation, and previously, we know for the social sector, it's taken years to get laws and policies changed.
Like enabling good lives, for example.
And this is being changed in a couple of weeks. And then another thing that our Prime Minister went and said, well, there's only a few people that have this view. It's not the rest of the country, so I'm not going to listen to these few that are making a stand. But wasn't another thing that she also said is, we're in red, don't go out, don't interact with people. So maybe some people who may not be vaccinated or who may be fully vaccinated, they're just saying, okay, I've got that view. I don't want to mandate, but I just don't want to go and protest because, yes, what if there was a mass outbreak? Don't want that.
I see what you're
I
saying.
agree with their view, but how do we make a change? So it's
Well,
not right.
you saw them. Those are all the people that were on the overpasses all the way through Auckland and every other
Yeah.
town that the convoy passed through. You know, there was
Yeah.
thousands of people all through Auckland that were out there on the Saturdays before Waitangi Day in the rain with signs and flags and all sorts. You know, cheering on these cars as they headed to Wellington. They had no idea that this was going to be a thing. They were just cheering on some cars heading down to Wellington. And there's a lot of people that were supporting those people that weren't heading down to Wellington. You know, far more people were supporting from where they could. And I just wanted to bring up what Hannah was talking about before with your friend and her partner that was injured. Everybody should be following Jab Injuries New Zealand on Instagram, and you should be looking at the profiles and the stories that they post, just to balance out the news and the stories you hear about the vaccine.
Let's do the maths and work backwards, right? If you take out all the people that immunocompromised that kind of went, yeah, fuck it, I don't know enough, but I'm being told I should. Take out all of the elderly that their decision might have been made by their children who would come into a different group. Take out all of the people that are mandated. Take out all of the people that were given $100 voucher in South Auckland
Or Air Jordans, you know,
yeah.
shoes.
Yeah.
And you start netting all of that, and then you take out the eligible population does not include people that haven't interacted with the health service over the last year. So anyone kind of remote and rural that just does their thing, don't go to the doctors, maybe they can't afford it, or that it's too far, or they've not needed to, they're all excluded. I reckon you're down, you're going to be down to around 50% pretty quickly. I mean, that's my rudimentary maths, but
yeah, I had a conversation with my neighbor across the road, who was an old lady who's lived in this established neighborhood since it was all farmland. This is North Shore area, and she has very similar viewpoints, and she's like, you know, an old ass lady, and she thinks the government is super corrupt, but you know, she was telling me about how you don't go to the doctor. You know, it's not normal to go to the doctor. Her whole life growing up, it was something you only went there for the odd rare occasion. It's either the society we live in making us more sick, or you know, it's something. But there's this culture now that it's okay to go to the doctor like yearly and get them to medicate you for stuff. But that's not normal. You shouldn't need the doctor ever unless you hurt yourself really, or something unfortunate happens genetically. But if you lead a healthy lifestyle, the doctor's not someone you visit regularly.
yeah.
I worry about the almost reprogramming of how people understand illness. I kind of alluded to it earlier around, like, if you get a cold, you kind of just stay home, eat chicken soup, and just deal with your life. But, like, having daily stand-ups about how many people get a certain illness or might have even been within the area when somebody had it. It's sort of like, what does that mean? And I suppose I'm about to go to the extreme end and say, if we accept that we all die one day, why are we living like this? 97% of people will likely survive COVID. There will be some people that will drop off. I might even be one of those people, because a couple of times I've had to go to the hospital for the flu just because I couldn't look after myself that well. If I drop off because of a flu, I'd just be like, fuck it. It was a good ride. Thanks for having me.
But I think there's a point there, Jade, is when you're thinking of yourself, that's valid. When there's someone in your family that's immunocompromised, and then you feel that your decision, that their mortality depends on your decision making, that's tricky. You know, I got a stepson that if he gets a cold, he's in Starship. You know, he's bad. He doesn't have the muscular capacity to breathe and push stuff out. So it's just a tricky one. It's tricky.
And I mean, for people in that position, what I'm saying is you will make the practical decision for yourself. I don't think we should be scaremongering, though. Like, am I right to say, Neil, that before COVID was a thing, you'd be really careful if you've got a cold anyway, and you'd have processes around it?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's common sense, right?
Well, there we are. There we are.
Yeah.
So you don't need to go around scaremongering and threatening people's livelihoods because they don't want to jab. Like even with the amazing example you just gave, I still believe it should be down to individuals and their families to decide how they're going to navigate.
See, the controversy, sorry, Neil, the controversy, I guess, Jade, arises maybe in what you said, depending on people's personal belief of COVID, right? Like, if you believe COVID is this really serious disease that most people catch and end up in hospital, like if you get it, you're going to get in hospital and end up on a ventilator, then what you're saying sounds like you're a cold, heartless, dickhead. But then if you believe that some people say COVID is like the flu, majority of people get it and are asymptomatic or have very light symptoms and recover within a couple of weeks or a week, then yeah, it should be a personal decision based on the risk factors in your personal scenario. But unfortunately, we're in a position where the government and these global health bodies have decided for us that this disease is so deadly that these are the mandated health processes that need to be in place, and they've removed all of our choice. I mean, we all know this, right? We've been here for 2 years. There's nothing different. But
do you know? I reckon it's
I wanted to raise that. Like, it depends on how people think COVID is, whether what you said, Jade, is right or not.
I think it's the first port of call. If anything, if the government want to do themselves a favour, is to come out and say, this is when we're going to give the power of responsibility back to the people. As much as it fucks me off to use those words, but I think at least people would go, okay, there's, it's going to be okay. I can look after myself. I've got all the information. I'll decide for myself, but it's going to be my responsibility to make the decisions based on what I know. And I think that's a step in the right direction, if anything, just to get some clarity over when are we going to be normal people and be respected that we can make our own decitions.
Well, we've got a comment in the chat. If I could just come to it. Sorry, Hannah. House 414 says, I was masking up and staying away from people when sick for years. It's how the Japanese do it, and it's worked well for them. So.
And what
we used to take the piss out of them, didn't we?
Yeah.
around SARS time, you'd walk down Queen Street and you'd be like, what are these crazy people doing?
And that's
now you're the crazy person if you're not doing it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm kind of
Sorry,
getting
Hannah.
for. It's your own personal choice now. You should know it should be your own personal choice of knowing your health, and that may be, and you shouldn't be judged if you take the virus or not take the virus. Take the vaccine, not the virus. Take the vaccine, because I know people that have decided not to take the vaccine because they want to have children, just want to wait and see, and after they've had a child, yes, they'll go and take it. They're not against vaccines, and it should be about, hey, your choice, and also if you don't take it, beware of the facts and look after yourself and stay healthy.
The vaccine, I don't care if I get cancelled anymore. I just need to say what I feel. With everything I've read, the evidence is clear, and Simon's helped me a little bit with this, with different links and whatnot. It's very clear now that the vaccine is about personal protection. It actually does not very much, despite all the debate, to prevent transmission. So from that end, I'm like, just piss off, leave my arm alone, and I won't go around any people that feel like they're at risk. Just leave me alone.
And I did want to actually say to you, in the beginning, our government did actually mention when we get to 90% of people double vaxxed.
Sorry, I keep moving up.
When we get to
2 shots for summer.
2 shots for summer, and that's us, and we won't question, and we won't even go there about it again. Well, that's long gone.
And now it's Booster Week. Did you see that, Simon? All the advertising for Booster Week.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
we've
God.
got a variant which I guess, the most well-publicized discoverer of the variant described it as mild, and has just come out recently saying that she was pressured not to describe the symptoms of Omicron as more mild than Delta, which we've seen the case. So what's happened is we're getting more cases of a variant that's, not as what would you describe, dangerous or risky, and yet we're pushing for more vaccination and stricter rules. Like, where is the science to justify the decision making? We're doing everything they say, and yet the situation is deteriorating. We had 800 cases today, and the unvaccinated people are still stuck at home doing nothing, and everybody is vaccinated, and boosters are going at a record rate. That's what Jacinda was saying. That more people were getting boosted in a single day than the people that were standing outside Parliament, and for what good, right? Are we going to avoid the food shortages and the blackouts that's going to happen once all of our critical industries shut down because thousands of people are going to be isolating? I mean, they've got that critical work scheme where people can test to stay at work. I mean, that's not going to function.
Can I add a couple of things on
How
this?
soon
Yeah.
can you ensure that the disability sector is a critical industry? Simon, you want to help me with that? Because I think people would absolutely love to have that in place, man.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be better than having all of the providers and individual, I guess, fund holders trying to justify to the government that they're a critical business.
Well, it's like the Waikato DHB who said that vaccinated nurses that are asymptomatic and test positive can still work on the front line. It's like, it makes no sense. I think it's an important thing we need to call out. I don't know if this has happened before on this podcast, but the booster is a third vaccination.
Yes.
Right. I think I just want to be really clear, because that is not. It's not easy to know that. It's quite difficult to understand. And then if you're immunocompromised, you're recommended to have a third shot and then a booster, which is effectively a fourth shot. So why isn't the third shot called a booster instead of being called a third shot? Like, I can't get my head around it. And I think the other thing to mention around the viruses are clever things, right? They've been around for a long time, and viruses don't. So you don't use the word survive or die. It's around being viable or unviable. And a virus, whatever is within it, wants to remain viable. And to remain viable, if you kill all your hosts, that's not a good strategy. So ultimately, and we know this from any virus, they become milder and milder and spread easier. And that's why we have the flu and colds.
Unless they're genetically modified to do the opposite.
That would be a good point.
Yeah. We can't confirm that.
Real fast, Simon, I'm wondering if you could read the next comment for us in the chat.
I don't have the chat open.
Oh, okay, I'll read it.
Yeah, go on. Challenge the black man to read.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, let's see. I remember SARS in 2003. It stuck with me. The terminology is also poorly chosen. I prefer to describe it as a seatbelt in a car crash. It doesn't prevent sickness or death, but reduces the chances of side effects, just as a seatbelt increases your chance of surviving a wreck. House 414, I'd almost agree with that, except for the fact that some people actually experience quite severe illness from the vaccination itself, and that's where I think we need to strike a balance. I'm not saying you're wrong. There's been lots of evidence around what you're saying, but I think the other side needs a little bit of consideration as well.
Can I just add here, in 1971, my dad had a horrific car crash and nearly lost both his legs, and it was the fact he wasn't wearing a seatbelt that was actually the saving grace for the outcome for him. That's nothing to do with it, but I'm just saying, it's not always as simple as airbags and seatbelts.
Yeah.
And
Well, don't get in the car, sit at home,
Yeah. Yeah, seatbelts, they were designed for safety, but any sort of rules, because seatbelt laws were first introduced in the States, and it was purely a revenue gathering operation, and a way for police to stop people with, probable cause to then either initiate an accidental killing of somebody, or, to put plant weed on them. But yeah, that's what it was in the States. Is they just set up those seatbelt laws so they could pull people over and say you weren't wearing a seatbelt.
It is statistically correct that no one ever got hurt sitting on their deck drinking a beer, just thinking, doing nothing, unless it was a tornado.
Neil, I'm wanting to pivot here for just a second. Obviously, you've listened to at least a couple of episodes of the podcast, I'm told, and I'm just wondering, is there anything in what you've listened to that you were ever iffy about, or disagreed with, or wanted to dig in a bit more about?
I don't think it's a case of being iffy or disagreeing. I think hearing people's opinions and points of view is a healthy thing,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
and I think there is a culture of like feeling like you got to be a bit underground to talk about certain things, and there's a bit of a social dance that happens nowadays,
Yeah.
whereas no one directly goes, are you vaccinated or not vaccinated, or what do you think about mandates? And it's like, what the fuck's going on? Why does anyone give a shit?
Yeah.
Why should I be in a situation where I should care if someone is vaccinated or not to come to my house and interact with me and
Yeah.
shake hands and hug or whatever you want to do? Like the whole thing's bizarre. So I think I'm kind of not answering the question, but I will answer it by saying I think any topic is why can't people talk about it, and why can't you have opposing point of views? Like if
Yeah.
you lived in an echo chamber, like if all my friends thought exactly the same as me, and I played the same fucking album from 1989 over and over again every day, my life's not going to be that rich, right?
Yeah.
And how else do you form opinion? It is through discussion and understanding someone, and you weigh it up, because there's nothing that's right or wrong. There's always a percentage of susceptibility. I just think you guys it's just refreshing to have that open forum and to talk about it. And I'd quite like someone to come on the show to be like totally the other point of view that would be the same, that would
Yeah.
happily discuss it without getting an arse on and slamming the phone down or whatever you want to call it, just to have a reasoned conversation.
I feel like I've got at least a couple of ideas who we could have on, Simon, that would be opposing views. But we can take that offline. House 414 Discord is good, but
That's
it doesn't
true.
happen anymore. If you're not with me, you're an enemy. I do not get it.
Yeah, well, just people have just stopped putting their opinions forward because, what happens if they don't agree with me? Well, I could lose my job, I could lose my home, I could, this, that, and another, and, why do it? But another thing that I've also picked up on is, why are people getting these views that, so I saw recently on Facebook, that, if you haven't had your 2 shots and your booster, you can't interact with me. How are they getting these views that, that person who's had a booster will be more, it's going to be less likely that they would transmit anything to you since they've had the same number of COVID-19 shots than you. How's that message being spread? That's what I want to know.
Is it something to do with the Pfizer contract, Simon? I know we've not actually touched on that on the show. I don't have a lot of detail, but I feel
I
like...
don't think
the rest
anyone
of the
does.
world.
Yeah.
But is it something to do with the Pfizer contract that they just have to get it in people's arms? Is that what this is all about?
I think that the idea is a subscription model. I think what they've had is some discussions with some groups like the United Nations and the WHO and Pfizer, and they've basically said, look, this thing's out here now. and look what we've done. We've created a vaccine, and the thing mutates, and it's clear that the vaccine doesn't protect people long term anyway. So, through all these reasons, we now have to create a vaccine that people take regularly and permanently for them to maintain their health and safety.
It's like the dope sick thing, right? It's double the dose. Double the dose. It's not working. No one's into it anymore. Just double the dose. Right. And it's a great fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, you've got to fill me in on that reference there, Neil.
Around Oxycontin in the States, there's
right.
There's a doco. Well, it's a reenactment, but it's fairly accurate around Oxycontin, how it was introduced, and the methods that oh god, what were they called?
Purdue.
That's it, Purdue. The family, who still have their plaques outside some museums, bizarrely, and eventually they were bankrupted. I don't want to tell this, bit of a spoiler here. But,
bankrupted.
Yeah, not personally though. Nobody personally.
No.
Any of the directors were found liable.
Just they bankrupted a subsidiary, right? You know that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they're now like a world good cause and educate people on, how to not get addicted to drugs when the company manufactured the drugs and they knowingly knew that they were addictive and marketed them as non-addictive. So doctors prescribe them, going, "This is awesome! Like, look at the results we're getting. People with chronic pain are suddenly going, I feel great." And of course, they're actually like heroin junkies. That's what they became. And then when they said, like, "I'm sick because of the drugs I'm taking," the answer was double the dose. They kept selling and selling and selling. It's called Dope Sick. I think it's on Disney Plus or something like that. But if you Google Pfizer, you have a look at their legal history.
Yeah.
Check out Pfizer's legal history, man.
We've talked about that plenty of times on here, being the most litigated company in the world, and only ever settling out of court. So, being the most, litigated and paying the most, but also never actually having to pay true reflective fines for what they've done. They've just managed to get deals outside of court to keep people silent, and it's just.
And they're pricing with the Starbucks model. That's evident. That is released because they will price at their price structure is they will sell it at the price that someone's most willing to pay, which is why the Starbucks model has a Viente and a $1 black coffee and all these different things in between. So someone will always give the most money for what they want, and that's not very socially conscious. You could definitely agree with that.
I like Starbucks. In the chat.
You're such a basic bitch.
The analogy was not around you.
In the chat, we have House414 again saying, "I've seen Dope Sick in person. It's not great." So they obviously have personal experience of what we're talking about. We're really sorry to hear that, by the way, House. I did want to pivot, Simon and Neil. I'm hearing more and more about the Great Reset, and to Simon's credit, actually, he brought it to the attention of the podcast some months ago. So for Simon, this would be a little bit old. But with the rising inflation around the world, more and more people are talking about it. Simon, you must be stoked that it's making the mainstream.
Well, I mean, it's weird, right? Like it all got fact checked into oblivion right at the start. So like the Great Reset, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, all of these exercises that these global activist groups and super funds, or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Rockefeller Foundation, and in collaboration with the United Nations and the World Economic Forum and the WHO, they ran these exercises before this all happened, and they have. Regardless of whether you say that this was all planned from the beginning, or whether it's just so happening to follow one of the plans that they created, and now they're responding how they planned it, we still know what they're going to do, because regardless of whether they're responsible for it, their plans are there. The Great Reset is available to read and watch on the website. You can read between the lines, or you can buy into what they say out loud, and you get a different picture of what they're trying to create. But the mantra of "you will own nothing and be happy" is quite a scary thought.
Simon, the finance minister was actually asked about the Great Reset on News Talk ZB, and the finance minister hung up the phone. I don't know if you've heard that clip where he said, "I'm not going to discuss something so ridiculous." You make a good point that it's not just conspiracy. There's actually a published document about how they intend to go about this.
It's a white paper. It's literally the bad guys saying, "Here are my plans. Study them so that when it happens, you can't say that we didn't warn you."
House 414 in the chat says the too long didn't read. We're going to be like the humans in Wall-E.
Yes.
Alright. Can I just touch on the whole reset thing? There's an endemic problem with the world in that everything has to grow, right? All the time there has to be growth. What's wrong with standing still? When I grew up, my dad had a house and he had a 25-year mortgage, and he went to his job, and he was in the job for decades, and it was a family home. It wasn't a tradable asset. He built it and we lived there. And then if you think, oh, okay, I'll go on a bit of a tangent here. I used to own a mortgage packaging company in the UK, and a packager wholesales money for lenders to brokers or bank for the, because the infrastructure, they couldn't keep up with it. And I was at a meeting with GMAC, who are owned by General Motors, who are one of the biggest lenders in the world, looking for a product meeting. And the guy there said to me, the question was something, I don't know how it came up. It's about an 80-year-old lady with no job living in a shack on the beach. And he said, if you can get me those customers, I will create the product. Because they sell it. It's a collateralized debt obligation. And when CDOs got caught out in the GFC, they all just went quiet, and then they started a whole new vehicle, which is actually a collateralized debt obligation, which is called something else with another acronym. So there's always going to be all this growth, and it's all false. It's not real money. It's just figures on a computer screen. And at some point, you cannot grow forever. You can't do it.
I'm so glad you raised that, and I'm aware, I'm really obsessed with Japan because I got to work there for a very short time, and ever since I never really got over it. I understand it's one of the countries in the world that has sustained negative growth in terms of GDP, but actually the experience of lifestyle for the Japanese has been fine.
Well, that's because it's called deflation, and that means you borrow money and you get paid for the privilege of borrowing the money, which is a good societal trend, if you ask me. I mean, it's nominal, right? Because computers can't cope with it. I mean, it's not good for people with savings.
No, fair point. Simon,
but then if you've got savings, you're doing all right.
Simon, do we need growth, or can we actually find another way around?
When can we stop, lying to ourselves about the inflation percentage? I've seen it grow week on week, right? It was around, what was it saying? It was 4% there, and now it was 5.9, and then over in the States, they're saying 7.5% inflation, and it's fellas, in the months leading up to the middle of 2020, up to June 2020, the American government, a private company called the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States of America printed over 40% of the total currency in circulation in the United States, and then just promptly decided to stop reporting on the numbers of bills that they started printing. So from the middle of 2020, since then, we have no idea how much money the Federal Reserve have been printing. They just stopped reporting on it. They printed 40%, and then they, back then, and then they did this huge $7 trillion relief bill that Biden has got through. That country is lying to its people.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
They're going to have Zimbabwean dollars and German francs in a few weeks.
My
Yeah,
goodness me.
If people don't get it, quantitative easing is the same as getting another credit card to pay your credit card, and then getting another credit card to pay the 2 credit, and getting another couple of credit cards. You've got 50 credit cards. At some point, something falls down.
Yeah, your kneecaps when the debt collector comes to get.
Yeah.
you
Well, what
want,
happens because it inflates? Then card number 1, instead of being 27% interest, is now 50% interest. Card number 50 is at 80% interest. It's all ass about face, and that's quantitative easing produces bonds, and the value is futuristic, and it just sits there until at some point the government rationalizes the debt. And there's got to be a market, there's got to be a buyer. Why would someone buy it? So the government buys it. That's off their own credit card to make the balance sheet look better. And then when you talk inflation, are you including house prices? Or are you not including house prices? Are you including fuel or not including fuel? What are you including for the inflation calculation? So I guarantee if you include houses, it's a shitload more than 5.9%.
Why are governments okay with this kind of debt level? Is it because it's not actually going to be their problem? It'll be like a couple of generations down the track?
I think it's because they don't want to be honest and tell people what the repercussions are of the alternative. Repercussion is probably not the right word, but what is the alternative? You know, it's like saying to people, you want a world-class health service, but you're going to have to pay 2% more tax. Everyone wants a world-class health service, but as soon as they go, I've got to pay a bit more, the average person en masse would go, it wouldn't be palatable as a policy. So, but everyone wants it. Someone's got to pay for it.
Yeah, right.
How do we see it all unfolding? I think we'll have global World War III, and then the aliens will come to save us, and then aliens will come and say, you guys need to sort it out and unite into one world government.
Well, communism doesn't work and capitalism doesn't work, so there's got to be something a bit more creative. And I was talking to Jade before we came on about my political opinions, and I'd say more about, like, why can't we vote for policies rather than parties?
I think we've talked about that, maybe on the live stream before.
Switzerland does that.
And they're fairly neutral, and they rock along quite nicely. Probably one of the highest quality of life in the world.
Yeah.
I honestly am having a flashback to one of our first ever live streams where I said something like, why can't you just get a text to your phone that's like, 1 for yes, 2 for no on the policy, and the months prior to it or whatever, they've been doing all these information campaigns about the policy, and then as soon they're just like bing, and you just reply 1 or 2.
I'll tell you what would help society.
Blockchain.
Yeah.
Perfect for blockchain technology. There's no reason why we couldn't do that.
What about UBI? What's people's thoughts on that?
Oh, fuck right
Universal
off.
basic income.
Oh
Jade
my
hates
God.
dole bludgers.
But it creates a different playing field, right?
Well, it feels like raising the minimum wage, but like on steroids, right? Like you're giving everybody the extra income, and I don't know, it just feels like it would just cause hyperinflation.
But how much do you reckon goes in paying people in civil servants to work out all the complications of working for families, benefits, allowances, taxes?
Actually, even just for this sheer peace of mind of removing all of the bureaucracy, like just to know that there's not offices full of people debating whether some pregnant mother gets the $50 a week or not. If that shit just didn't happen, I feel like I could probably pay more in taxes or whatever for it. Yeah, because that shit does actually irk me, that there's so many people's job who is just to manage policies of benefits and handing out money. It just makes it cost more.
Don't even get me started on child support, man. How can you have a, not for me, but how can you have a 50-50 share care arrangement? Yeah, if one parent, and especially when they're female, Christ alive, earns more money than the other person, but they have to pay the other person money. How does that work? And if the other person's claiming working for families, they don't even get it. It goes to IRD and they bank it.
Yeah. It pisses me
That
off.
is fucked up.
it doesn't affect me personally, but the child support system really pisses me off in New Zealand. I think it does not make sense, and I think there's no chance for New Zealanders to even have their own personal situations, and they could agree on a system that they want to do, but no, ID says no, you can't do that. You've got to pay child support. Doesn't matter if you've got your own personal arrangement between mother and father and how much you pay per week, and that would mean that they would actually get the money directly in their pocket, whereas a good portion goes directly straight into the pocket of the government. So
Real
So
fast.
that answers the question.
R-
Hannah, the original question, can government care about children? Evidently not.
yeah,
If they're taking a cut that should go to a child and pocket it.
yeah.
that can't
Real,
be right.
real fast. My personal experience of child support, like, there's no facts behind this, of course, but I swear to God, I'm paying for 3 black men that the government can't track down. My child support bill is absolutely enormous, but strangely, I'm a little bit proud to be able to afford it.
I actually had that happen for real when I lived in England. I had a letter come through and it said, it's alleged that you are the father of Anthony Malcolm Johnson. And I was like, hang on a minute. So, because Anthony's my middle name, right? And Johnson John. So I'm reading this letter and it goes, in Southampton or wherever they're playing. And I was like, when was the last time I was in Southampton and what date was it and all that? And
What
it turned
football
out
game
that
was on that night? Yeah.
the whole thing was there was someone miskeyed one number on my UK national insurance number, which is like an IRD number, an NHI number, and that just triggered. It's just coincidental that the names were similar, and but that could ruin someone's life. And I phoned them up, like the IRD, whatever they're called, I
Yeah.
can't remember now.
Yeah.
I said, "What the fuck is going on?" And they said, and they eventually sent me £100 with no omission of liability. But can you imagine, like, some families that could have ruined their whole life getting a letter like that?
Yeah.
And another thing that's really annoyed me, which I've learned recently over the last couple of years, is that it doesn't matter if the child's mother gets a new husband, so then she's basically getting child support, she's getting a full income for herself, she's getting her new husband's then all making money, so she's getting more money is coming into the house than typically would have for a 2-parent home.
Who else will plastic surgeons rely on if it wasn't for a woman in that position? I'm telling you, who else would they rely
Who
on?
else?
And
Who
they need
else?
the money, right? They're on the bread
Well,
line,
maybe-
man.
There's quite a few government-sponsored transition surgeries that require plastic surgeons.
Yeah,
That probably gets a few people through their winter slump.
I'll probably need a
They have a
couple of
slump.
drinks before we talk about that one, Simon. So maybe maybe a topic for another day. And I'm mindful of the
Sure
time.
thing.
So wondering if we should move into final thoughts. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure having you along, mate. I really appreciate you coming out.
Likewise, and I hope you'll invite me back another time at some point. It'd be cool to do this again.
Have you got any final thoughts based on the conversation today?
Yeah, my final thoughts are, things can't always grow. That's not reasonable. You can't tell people what to do. That's not reasonable. And child support's fucked. That's not reasonable. There's nothing reasonable except a reasonable conversation. And if reasonable people have a reasonable debate, you tend to get a reasonable outcome.
That's
Sounds fairly
absolutely
reasonable.
amazing.
Yeah. Who'd have thunk, eh?
Mr. Anderson, final thoughts.
It's been cool. Thank you very much, Neil, for coming along, and Jade for allowing Neil to join. It's clear that it had some very valuable conversation, and I knew this would go along kind of like it did, and I think what would be really cool another time is to move into the format. This was the first live stream of the year, so it kind of was a bit of a big catch up. But once we move into some formats with, we bring some news or some current events forward or whatever a topic, then that would be really cool to see what Neil wanted to bring forward and hear some of his thoughts on that stuff.
Sounds
But
like a challenge.
Oh, but cool. Thank you for everyone watching, and yeah, it's good to be back.
Yeah, for me, this has been great to finally get back online and have conversations with reasonable people. I've got a lot of concerns for society as a whole, though. I'm looking forward to New Zealanders waking up and getting rid of the current Prime Minister as soon as possible. Appreciate you, Simon. Appreciate you, Neil, and Hannah, as always, for the contributions you make. If you're listening at home and you haven't already, consider following me on social media to get all the various updates of the pieces of content we put out. But for now, thank you for being a part of the channel. Thank you for being a part of the journey. Please stay awesome, and Hannah,
We'll see you guys on the next one.